It is my absolute pleasure to introduce Sarah Bullock to you. Sarah, we've been working with Sarah for a year now. It just blows my mind when I'm hearing what their team has started doing and how they approached agility, starting in a very lightweight mindset manner. So before I go into the content, I'd love to have you, Sarah, introduce yourself. Warmly welcome. I'm honored to have you here. I'm looking very much forward to our talk.
Thank you. And hi, everybody. It's great to be here this afternoon or this morning for wherever you are in the world. And thank you, Rena, for inviting me along. So as Rena might have mentioned, I'm currently at Experian, where I am just about excitingly to start a new role as Agile Delivery Lead within the global talent and learning space. And I've been with Experian for the last couple of years, with a particular focus in the last 12 months around Agile. But prior to that, probably a decade and a half in generalist HR, HRD roles, and then more recently in the talent and learning space. I'm an interim by background, but because I've had such a great time in the Agile space in the last 12 months, I've kind of been finally pulled back into an organisation, which I'm really excited to do and to share with you a little bit about how we've got on our first year, and hopefully give you some practical examples of actually what it's like going on this journey. So should we jump in, Rena?
Yes, we will jump in. I'll just tell the people how we're working today. So today you're going to see a bit of presentation from Sarah, pictures and storylines. We're going to stop at certain points to have some discussions. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, interrogate Sarah around this. So that's how we're going to work today. And we're really glad that you can spend some time with us, because I think this will be a very energizing session. So you go ahead, Sarah.
Great. Okay, we're on. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to talk us through really where we started, and I'm anticipating that some of the things that I share in terms of where we started will be quite recognizable for many of you on this call. There was nothing unique or special about where we were at. I'll talk to you about some of the things that we've tried, and also lots of the things that we've learned along the way. So when I mentioned at the start that it would sound quite familiar to you, we've got an organisation that's had rapid growth in the last couple of years, but about 20,000 employees globally, with a very decentralised operating model, so real focus within the regions. And as part of that, as you'd expect, we've started to have bubbling up pockets of agile practice, but primarily in the tech and the product space. So as we started to think about agile, we knew there were a few people out there that we could start talking to. And the drive towards agile was largely driven by my boss, Leslie Wilkinson, who joined Experian probably about 18 months ago from a deep agile background with ING. Out in the Netherlands. So we had Leslie talking to us about agile. Frankly, I didn't know what it was or what she was really talking about at the start. But we were an organisation and an HR team and a talent and learning team where I sat that was very busy. Loads of really great stuff, delivering loads, landing loads, more than we could handle. And there were varying levels of knowledge within the team about agile, from deep experts like Leslie through to zero like me, and a handful of people in between. And as a talent and learning team, that's a team of Leslie's DRs of probably about 9 of us, a real mix of regional and local focus. Some of us just worried about global stuff, and then talent leads who had a real focus on their regions. And typically, that was how we developed projects, some global stuff, and then talent leads working in their regions as well. And everything was done through a waterfall approach, because frankly, that's all that we knew. So these are questions that we started to ask ourselves, and I may be claiming that everybody was asking these, but I know it was certainly me. As I started to find out more about this, I spoke to some of the people within the tech and the product team, and they said things to me like, well, it's not really about the processes, it's all about the agile mindset. And I'm like, I don't really know what you're talking about. What is this agile mindset? And just through having a mindset, how can you start to change things? couldn't really grasp what Agile was. And when it spoke about in the tech and product space, it didn't really feel relevant to how we were operating in the HR world. And then when people started to talk about, well, it's about testing with the customer and being prepared to change, you start to kind of think, well, we're kind of doing that already, surely, aren't we? We always kind of know what our customers need, and we always do a pilot. So what's so special about this Agile approach? So we really started to scratch our heads. And then the big question, of course, was, where do we start? Because as soon as you start lifting the lid on all of the tools, it's like, gosh, do we have to, from Monday, start using all of these things at the same time? So these were the questions we had. And for those of you giving yourselves ones and twos, I'm anticipating these might be some of the things that you're starting to think about as well. So what we started, so we actually did end up starting with changing our mindset, and we were lucky enough to meet Rena about 12 months ago as we started to think, actually, how do we make this relevant for an HR organization? And so the key thing that we did was we started small. So this wasn't about transforming the organization or transforming HR or even transforming global talent. It was just about working in our team of 7 or 8 people in a slightly different way. And we committed to thinking about 3 things just for starters. So really thinking customer and really having the customer at the heart of what we did, which was not just about delivering a great solution to them, but understanding what the problem was that they actually had in the first place. We've done a lot of work in prioritizing as a team, as opposed to going, well, I've actually got this long list of priorities myself, and that's prioritization. It isn't really. Working as a team and being really transparent so that we end up with a team set of priorities. And then thinking much more about incremental delivery and the concept of release thinking. And I'll talk you through a bit about what that change meant for us, and hopefully a couple of live examples of lessons learned along the way.
Could I stop you just here? Because I think there is one thing which is extremely interesting about you being here speaking. Can you remember yourself, Sarah, as being a really newbie to Agile? What it felt like to start hearing about this? What was your first kind of thinking? What if you're a person who is in this call and you need to start bringing agility into an organization with people who know zero about Agile? Can you try to help us kind of put ourselves in their shoes? What's their reaction? What are they hearing?
I think the things that I think we struggled with a little bit was, aren't we doing this already? Because people do think, well, it's about having a disciplined project plan or about really understanding the customer. And I think for us, one of the big changes that we had to start making was thinking we've got to let go of our expertise, which is hard when after decades of being in HR, your trade is your expertise and your knowledge of people, practices and processes, and learning how to surrender that and going, well, actually the customers kind of know best, or our colleagues know best about what they need. And that was a big change for us. I think the other thing that felt slightly daunting was learning about lots of things like scrums and kanbans and tables, and that can feel really quite daunting. And I think we might come on and talk about this a little later, but actually starting small or just starting with 1 or 2 things made it feel easier for us.
Not pouring the full Agile language on everybody at stage 1. Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
So start small has been our mantra through all of this, and we have to keep pulling ourselves back to it at the points we get really excited and go, oh, let's do more, and we go, no, let's just do a little bit.
Excellent. You can continue.
So customer centricity, and the key thing here was we really have been pushing ourselves to work out what the problem is for the customer, and making this transition from believing that we are the experts into believing that it's actually our colleagues who are the experts, and changing our approach from asking feedback on, oh, we've built this lovely thing here, what do you think? But actually up front going, how might we design something that is going to work best for you and to meet your needs? So being much more proactive up front at the diagnostic phase, and moving from rolling out really great things that we think they need to do to asking what the need really is. And it's been fascinating. And I know personally, I get a huge burst from speaking to our leaders and our colleagues about what's going on in their world. And actually quite a lot of the time we get it really wrong. And I can give you a few amusing examples along the way. But one was we did a big launch, and I'll talk about the Leadership Exchange in a little while, but a launch of a huge global portal with a great big message from our CEO. And we thought, well, this is great. This is going to be really motivating for people. They know this is driven from the top. And then I spoke to a couple of guys saying, well, what do you think? And they said, well, you get like a big standard message from the CEO, you know, he hasn't written it, you know, it's been written by somebody in internal comms. What would really have made the difference for me is my manager talking to me about this tool. And you go, oh, okay, that's interesting. We hadn't thought about it like that. So all the time, those things that as HR people, we believe are really obvious, I go back and check with your end users, because you might be surprised. So prioritization and transparency has been a really key change for us as Leslie's leadership team. And historically, we've agreed a set of big annual objectives. We've set personal goals on an individual basis based upon the products and solutions we're going to develop over the course of the next 12 months. We've each had individual one-to-ones with our leader, I'm sure, checking about progress on those annual goals. And prioritizing everything on the list is stuff that's really important and needs to be developed. And moving into quarterly prioritization as a team has meant us as Leslie's leaders agreeing a shared set of priorities, which is not about presenting your objectives for everybody else just for them to nod and go, they look great, but for us to work together and go, as a team, in the next 12 weeks, what are the things that we believe meet the biggest needs in our business? And what are the problems that we're seeking to address? And we've now got a quarterly cycle of regrouping once a quarter to revisit those and understand as a team what we've delivered in the quarter, what might we need to carry forward, and what are the priorities for the next quarter. And this has started to bring some real immediate benefits. I mean, the first couple of sessions were really hard work, and we were all kind of scratching our head and going, well, I've got 12 priorities I need to bring to this meeting. So we were really strict, and we said each person can only bring 2, and it's your top 2, and we will devote our time to those. That long tail of other things that you really believe you have to get done, we're not talking about today, and that may fill some space, but it's the top 2. And this here's a really live example of the benefits that starts to bring. So we had 3 team members, one of the talent leads saying, I've got to build a regional career framework in my business area. This is really hard. There's only one of me. I've got a small team. We're really busy. How am I going to find the space to do this? I had another person who was looking at how we build globally a personalized learning offer, and another member of the global team looking at how we introduce strategic workforce planning and how we understand what skills we have, how we develop those skills. So hopefully what you're starting to see, you've got 3 people here are sort of examining similar parts of the same problem. And through this discussion, what we started to realize was these 3 different perspectives feed into a single problem. And lo and behold, what happened then was we ended up with 1 value canvas as opposed to 3. And we ended up with 3 really talented people working together on the same problem to build something that's initially going to be a regional solution, but is then genuinely globally scalable. And that was a bit of an eye-opener for all of us to watch that in play in our second session, that was. So it really helps to ensure you're getting lined up and you've not got people in different regions doing sort of the same thing in their own way.
Could I stop you here for a while? I've got one thing, because when If you go back to the previous slide, 2 slides back before this prioritization slide, this one.
Yeah.
This is the one thing that is most difficult for teams that are moving towards agile on scale. So if you got more teams than one, if you got more items than 5 on your list, you've got like 30, 40, 50 items that you need to deliver on, to start really doing this prioritization in a different way. And this doesn't mean that you prioritize the things and that's your list. It means that you're actively leading what your people are using their time and capacity on. And that means quite a lot of trade-offs. And it's one of the toughest things that I'm working with many customers. So it's hard. What are your thoughts on this? Can you elaborate a little bit on what the journey is for a person moving from the usual prioritization and annual goals to this cadence of quarterly looking into what are we going to spend time, money, capacity, capabilities on?
It can feel really hard. And you spend your time and your capability and your capacity on thinking and getting really clear on what the problems are that you're trying to address, and making sure, in many cases at the start, most of the problem statements we had were just how do I produce this solution, or how do I get this tool I've got out there? And we really spent some time trying to work on, well, actually, let's go right back to why we even need this tool in the first place, and then think about how we're addressing it. It takes time, it takes practice, and we've gone into this process with a mentality of we're not going to get it right first time, we're just going to keep on getting better ourselves. So we've taken the agile mindset into our own learning about how we evolve through the quarterly prioritization place.
That's excellent.
The very fact of prioritization, though, means that things are going to get deprioritized. And so that can feel a bit uncomfortable sometimes, because I know personally, I had a lovely project. I was really excited about it, going to make a real difference to the business. I'd done my value canvas. And actually, when we came together as a team, it became clear quite quickly that there was a huge priority here, which we all had to get behind. And if we're all going to get behind this, something else needs to go. So that project I was working on was deferred. It was put on ice. And we brought it back to the table 12 weeks later. And it can feel a bit hard, but actually when that's balanced with, but we're going to do a brilliant job on this fantastic thing here, it becomes really motivating and it really brings the team together. But yeah, it's a bit disappointing in the moment when you're like, but I really wanted to do this pet project.
Yeah, and it's also very valuable, right? It was also important. So
yes.
Everything is important on this level that we're working on. But this leads to really sitting down and thinking about what is the value that we need to get out really now.
Yeah.
One of the things that also come up quite often is what I call boomerangs. For those who are new to Agile, I call it portfolio management, managing the portfolio of activities across the capacity that we have. And when people are funneling items, either projects, initiatives, or go-dos into this portfolio, we need to have a funnel to say, are we ready to start developing this now? Is it clear when it comes into the portfolio? And you're speaking about value canvases here, but one thing that I want to mention is sometimes people are bringing in great ideas, but they're not quite ready and clear on what problem are we solving? What need are we really delivering value to? And that needs to be boomerang back to say, maybe we need a small discovery phase here. Maybe we need to go back to your first slide to say, what's the customer really needing, to get that input, to really understand the customer's environment. When I say customers, our employees, managers, leaders, the business, the candidates, to really understand what are we delivering here. Maybe it's not that magical, perfect solution that they actually want or need. Maybe it's just part of it. Maybe it's 1/10 of it that would bring the value. So what are your thoughts around handling these boomerangs, or things that are kind of brought into the portfolio but are not ready to start? We're not ready to start working on them because it's not clear what we're solving for.
Yeah, I think it requires a change in mentality. So it's got to be okay for people sometimes to bring half-formed ideas, or I think this might be a problem, but I'm not quite sure what the problem is, and to create that space to discuss those and then agree there is a piece of work to go away and discover first, because the chances are the problem will evolve or you might uncover new stuff. So part of it is about being open to that. And we've got a live example at the moment where we think we want to look at our global early careers. We don't know if there's a big problem there. All we know is it's quite a dispersed approach at the moment, and we don't know if that's the right way or not. So our release for the coming quarter is purely just to go away and do that investigation work, to speak to early careers folk, to speak to HR folk, to speak to leaders, to look externally and understand the landscape and understand what problems there are there, and then decide what it is that we might want to do with that. So building in time for that and making that okay, as opposed to coming with the answer, is a big and important change for us to go through.
That's excellent. This means that you actually are starting to run two portfolios parallel. You start running the portfolios of the actual deliverables, the actual projects, plus a what we call discovery portfolio or experiments, where you start finding out what really is the requirements, what the features are that you need to build. And those are smaller scale discovery projects, if you may call it that. So those can also be done by the same people, but of course you need to book some capacity and time for that discovery. If you look at the big picture, when you start running this discovery on a more strategic level to really see where you need to focus your time and effort, what are the features that the people need or the users need, that will lead to savings in cost and time on scale. What are your thoughts around that? That's my statement. If you do discovery well, you will actually save cost and time on scale.
Absolutely, because you're confident then that what you're going to deliver is a value add for the people that you're looking at. And I think the other thing that I've certainly learned is, through doing that investigation at front, A, it gives you greater confidence, but B, it also enables you to try some things out, and when they're not working, to let them go, as opposed to getting so far down the track with something and having invested so much time and emotion and cash. Sometimes it can be hard to let some of those things go. So starting small and finding out and being open to that has been a good lesson for us. So just really in brief, this is a value canvas that we use internally, and once a quarter we'll take our value canvases from the previous quarter, understand what needs to be carried over, and then each team member, and there's some combined ones as I've mentioned, will come along ready to talk about their value canvases. And the kind of things that we spend a lot of time debating are: what's the problem? Are we really clear on what that problem is? Who are the target users? How much effort do we think we're going to need in this quarter amongst our team to devote to this? And what additional resource might we need? And where are we going to get it from? And then down you see in the bottom left-hand corner what that minimum viable product is, or practically what are we expecting to see in the next quarter delivered. And what's great about that is it stops you having these big, long 6-month or annual huge goals. You're accountable and very clear for what you need to come back with in the next 12 weeks. And that's really motivating as well, because you can actually see some quite tangible results quite quickly. This is our version. We put stuff in, we took stuff out. And so I'd encourage anybody thinking about this not to be a slave to this form, but to use something that works for you.
If you start going back to just, we introduced the value canvas to your team, right? And the first time around when you do this, it is very laborious. It's hard work to get your projects described or initiatives described through a canvas for everybody to see what you're going to deliver on one page. Hard work, but the next time around, those are there, and the new ones are just not that many. So you start having that frequency and that routine up to have a one-page view of things that you aim to deliver. What's your view on the value canvas kind of introduction to the team the first time around?
We had 2 3.5-hour meetings, plus all of the one-on-one time beforehand to go through with everybody. Here's what it looks like. Here's what a good one could look like. Let's think about yours. And then we had one quite long, intense session where people were trying to explain what was on their canvas, and then we reconvened for another 3.5 hours then to work through actually what it was that we wanted to focus on. So it felt like hard work, but we learned a lot. And we learned in some cases that we weren't quite sure why we were doing things, apart from somebody had said they really wanted it. But it enabled us to really strengthen the relationships within the team, challenge each other, tighten the wording. And we've now done 5 quarters now. And we did one of these last week and wrapped up the whole thing in 3 hours. So we've more than halved the time and the efficiency. So it gets better. But the whole point of going into it, you have to go into it with the mentality that you want your value canvas challenged and changed. This is really different to just sharing your objectives. This is the group testing and refining together.
It's really about being open to that feedback and having that mindset of, I don't have to have a perfect canvas coming into this meeting. My colleagues will help me because we're here together. And it requires that mentality and that psychological safety to do that. Excellent.
Yeah, and I think not owning that canvas yourself, it's not you on that canvas. The canvas is for the group to decide if this is a priority or not. There's nothing personal if yours doesn't make it through. And that's a real change as well, I think, for people. We're all offering in and all refining together.
It is. Here's one thing that I also mentioned to you when we were speaking about this, is that if you go to this way of working, you can't really have your performance management and your bonuses tied to your personal goals, because that's when you are not ready to give up on your canvases and you want to push them through. If what £5,000 are connected to getting those canvases through during this year. So it also connects very clearly to how we set up our teams, how we build our compensation and benefit programs, how we start acknowledging and rewarding this type of behavior. So it is really a mindset thing, but also connected to the structures around our teams. I just want to mention that. That's really important.
Yeah. And I think it is really important. But I think we're not there on that part. Yeah, so we're doing quarterly prioritization, kind of independent of the annual performance cycle. So things aren't in sync, and it's okay. So I guess one thing to think about is you don't have to wait until you've got all of your performance and your reward cycles lined up. It's great when you get there, I imagine, but we have kind of said, okay, we know there's an annual performance cycle, but we're going to worry about the next 12 weeks. And
that's a good input, because some people are thinking always that if you start with Agile, everything has to be in order. But I love your approach of let's take it stepwise. We are doing the right things here. Let's sort this out and sort out the bonuses and whatever in a way that works for us, and be very flexible there as well. Yeah. Let's move forward. Oh, this is so good stuff.
Okay. So release thinking, which is my personal passion, and this is much more around incremental delivery, so smaller slices of product and delivering value far quicker to our end users. And for us, that required this kind of letting go of perfection or wanting to put this lovely polished product to our end users. We've long had a waterfall approach, and it's an approach I've used for decades, and this kind of idea that within HR, with the experts, we build the product, we pilot it, and we do big projects. And moving instead towards being much more open to constant iteration, constant learning from our customers, introducing something that's a minimal lovable product, we call it, and being open to co-creating with your end users, as opposed to telling them, we know this is the best thing that you're going to get, or this is just what you need. And this concept of small launch, small investment, and being ready to give up on things if they're not adding value. So it's good, it's easy, it's far less stressful, and actually it's motivating because you deliver value far quicker to your colleagues. And I just wanted to give a really brief example of this, because I've been working on a bank of questions for our TA colleagues. And it's a horrible, ugly looking Excel sheet with no fancy bits on it. The end goal will be a fully e-enabled database. But at the moment, it was looking really quite basic. And I spoke to one of my colleagues and I said, hey, how do you fancy trying this out with some of your senior execs? And this person said, yeah, a bit risky. I'm not really sure they'll like it. It's a bit rough and ready. Can you come back when it's a bit more ready? And I was like, okay, fair enough. Spoke to another region and said, how do you feel about trying this out? And they said, yeah, let's give it a go. And they trialed it with their leaders, and the response that we got from them was remarkable. And it was, Sarah, I know this looks horrible, but it's great. It really does the job. It's helping me hire better people. I look forward to the nicer looking version, but in the meantime, can I carry on using this? Because I love it. And thank you for asking me at this point for my feedback. I really appreciate that. So I would really encourage you, if you've got any nervousness about your end users being offended by your basic product, I think you might be surprised, because people really embrace having the chance to influence something. And if it's delivering value, just why not get it out there? We risk missing opportunities to have an impact by holding things back until they're all lovely. So big lesson for me personally.
I'd love to stop there for just a while. I'm working with some companies with global teams. I understand there's a little bit of mix between we might need to have a global launch of something at the same time. On the other hand, we are both challenging that as well. Do we always need to have a global launch of everything? Could we do something stepwise? Could we do something in a slice of value? So let's say that we need a global onboarding program. Why can't we just do a global first week program or pre-boarding as a slice? Let's do that first and learn from that, and then see how we can move on, kind of building on features. Sometimes we can't launch features globally. We need to kind of build those and launch a bigger package of features. But do we always have to build that elephant and implement the elephant everywhere at the same time? What are your thoughts?
I think it's something which we've spent a lot of time thinking about in the last 12 months, because we are a global organization and we're trying hard to get greater alignment across our regions. And I think it can feel really daunting and really complicated to try and roll things out globally. And we've started to be much more deliberate and less apologetic about starting small and saying we want this to be global, but we're going to try it out in Italy first, for example, or we're going to try it out with this particular narrow population, and we're going to learn from that. And often that can create a bit more pull as well, because as people start to see there's this really cool stuff happening over here, it can create some further momentum. So yeah, I'll come on and talk a little bit about our leadership exchange, but that was a great example of starting small with something that ultimately is big and global, and actually the value that brings, because ultimately it makes your rollout faster because you end up with something that's going to work.
It does, and you're also learning about, you think you know how to release things. We talk about releases when we adopt or implement things into organizations. We in HR think that we know the best way how to release and how to build the comms packages and what managers should do. But there's a saying that the second the product hits the real customer, there's failure happening. So the product will never survive the meeting with the real customer the first time. So why don't we do that product launch or release and as a soft launch, learn from what's going wrong, iterate on the approach, and then start scaling is how I think about this. Excellent. Let's move forward. Thank you, Sarah.
Better to discover things aren't working with 200 leaders than 2,000, I find as well. So to that end, this slide here just shows you the journey that we've been on with a leadership portal that we've been building at the moment. And this work began, almost a year ago now. So what this highlights for you here is the in-depth work, discovery work that we did with our customer base up front. So we ran lots of focus groups, lots of one-on-one interviews to really understand how our leaders learn, what gets in the way of that, how they're supported in their career development, because all of that was really important for us thinking about, actually, if we develop a portal, is anybody actually going to use it? And if they do, how do we design that in a way that's going to be exciting and interesting for them? Over the course of the summer, we then started to filter all that feedback and think about how it could look. And then the bit that's perhaps most relevant to this team is October, when we started to really build this and test this with our end users. And we went into our first release with about 200 leaders globally. And we gave them a prototype version of Leadership Exchange. It looked okay, but it didn't look great. It probably had about 30% of the functionality. And we actively tested, tried, got them to try and break it, got their feedback, evaluated how they were using and what they were using. And then that, over the course of the next 4 to 6 weeks, really informed ultimately what our first big release looked like when we rolled this out to 4,000 leaders. But I can guarantee we felt a whole lot more comfortable introducing it to 4,000, having done all of this learning and listening up front. But even then, with release 1, we know there is more to do, and we have more releases to come. So, for example, in release 1, our 360 isn't a 360, it's just a self-assessment. Second release, we're going to introduce 360 to a slice of our leaders. And we're going to introduce some extra functionality. So instead of us spending 2 years creating a huge thing that people couldn't possibly digest in one go, we're breaking it up. It's easier for us, and actually it's easier for our end users as well. So it's been a good test case for us, I think, in terms of trying out some of this practice.
This is so good stuff for you who are listening to this. I mean, this is the future of how we're building our people products. It's going to be a product organization. So HR is going to be building people products and services. So there's going to be the product interface, the infrastructure, the service interface, and we're going to start releasing them as products, features, doing experiments, small scale on the side, understanding how the people are using it, and then scaling something that that works. And I think that is such a beautiful way of just expressing this and showing this example to the audience today. Thank you, Sarah, for that.
Finally, I mean, hopefully you've picked up that there's so much that we've learned over the past 12 months. But I think what we're learning is it's really hard work trying to actually work out what the problem is. And we've spent a lot of time on that, and we'll continue to need to spend a lot of time working out why on earth we're doing some of the things that we're doing. And it can feel difficult to give up some of those projects that are really personally important to us for the greater cause. But the big things we've learned is, I mean, Agile is for everyone. This time last year, I was getting quite frustrated because it was all in tech and products, and I couldn't work out how to use it in my own work. But the tools and techniques which we found have benefit beyond tech and product into all functions. We have started really small. I've only shown you today the value canvas, and whilst our mindset has changed, the amount of tools we're using is basically that. We haven't used lots of things like Kanban boards yet, or other project solutions, and that's okay. Work out what works for you. We're getting stuff faster to market. We're making connections between projects that wouldn't otherwise have been made. We're focusing our resource whilst it matters. And yeah, the reminder, we can be our own worst enemies. We'd like to shield our customers from the workings out, but they really like getting involved. So I would encourage you to engage with the end users. And actually these nice quarterly prioritization sessions help us achieve more, and that always feels great, I think. So so thank you. I mean, that's probably our story to date. We're going to continue to do more of this, small incremental changes, and we're just going to keep on learning. So
this is excellent. Thank you so much, Sarah. I'd love to have a couple of questions still before we all go. One of the things that is what I've noticed is people are not going to pick this up by themselves. They are going to need some support. So both you and your colleague have been professionally trained into understanding this on a deeper level and how to coach people and understanding. We did a bit of mindset training for people just to open up their kind of bring the openness to try things in a different way. And it's an investment that you did, and it seems to pay off. What are your thoughts around starting to understand the agile mindset and starting to try this way of working? What does a person in HR need to be best equipped for that?
The best thing I think you can equip yourself with is an open mind, which feels a little bit intangible, but I think having the opportunity to try some of these things, and certainly speaking to the wider HR team, encouraging people just to start individually and say, well, actually, we don't have to kind of change our whole team to agile practices from next Monday, but actually on this next project, I'm going to make sure that I am really clear up front on what the problem statement is. And that's, or I'm going to sit down and I'm going to interview 5 employees about what's going on for them before I start building my next learning course, for example. So there's very small things that individuals can do even before the organization might be ready to transform into an agile organization. And that's very much the kind of mentality that we're just trying to roll out or introduce into our HR.
You started with a couple of questions that you wanted everybody to start thinking around. One was, what's the problem that I'm solving for, right? The second was, you started having what we call retrospectives, kind of improvement discussions, either with yourself, with your team, across teams, and you asked a couple of questions. Can you share those, which those were?
Yeah, sure. No, we have a kind of really simple model to reflect learnings, which is what have I tried, what have I learned, and what am I going to do next? And they're just so simple, and you can use them by yourself, you can use them with a couple of teammates, and they're just a great way of just encouraging that mindset of it's okay not to be perfect, we've just got to keep on getting better.
And that's a fantastic way to end this call as well. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, Sarah. It's so nice to have you sharing this. You've done a brilliant job. Not many teams are where you are in just 1 year, but you've now started, if you look at how you deliver products in a more agile, incremental. I love how you said you bring them in to bring input, not just feedback. And there is a difference between experimenting and piloting the last version of the product. So a big thank you. And I can hear from the audience as well that they are really happy and have learned a lot today. So I was asking for questions. There is Ekaterina is asking, Sarah, thank you very much for sharing. Really impressive progress you've made in just 1 year. Could you please advise what helped you to progress? Is it learning, coaching, leadership support? What?
Oh, all of the above. What helped us to progress? I think a lot of credit goes to Leslie, our boss, for creating a real climate in which it was okay to try new things. So if you're thinking about leading your own team through this, I would really encourage to create that climate where it's okay for people to experiment, to learn, to have a go, and remember to keep it small. So and then we coached each other, so part leadership and part coaching, I would say.
Excellent. There is another question, very curious. Has your L&D team adopted Agile, and any specific lessons to share from them? From sharing.
Yeah, so our L&D team is arguably part of our global talent and learning team. So we have teams within each of the regions, but then my teammates at a global level as well have a focus on talent and learning. And my colleague is a real expert in Agile as well. So very much so, we've got quite a lot of online learning internally, and we're spending time this week and next week speaking one-on-one with colleagues about how they learn, what they think of their career, what does career even mean to them, and how can we support them in their development so that we start to kind of refine our learning offerings.
L&D is, in my opinion, one of the key areas where you really quickly can start adopting agile ways of working
Huge
and the mindset
opportunity.
immediately, because there is not that much. So I wouldn't start in payroll or compensation somewhere where there is very heavy compliance and structures around that are long-term structures that you need to go to all the way to the board with. But L&D, talent, performance, onboarding, different process development, services, culture, DE&I, all of these are very well equipped, kind of set for the agile mindset and agile approach.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that I would encourage people to think about is how can we make things as simple and as basic as possible? Because it's one of the things that we're tripping ourselves up on even now within our own team, and we go, hang on, wouldn't it be great if it could do X, Y, Z? And then we go, it doesn't matter. We don't need X, Y, and Z. It's working as it is. Unless our clients say they need it, let's not embellish things ourselves. So yeah.
One last question. Kelly asks, how far advanced is the rest of the Experian business in Agile, for example, in IT or operations?
I think it's probably patchy. I hope I'm not doing my colleagues a disservice. We've got a fantastic global agile team who are looking at how we start to evolve our practices internally. We've got some really good practice in our tech space, in our product space. We've got a fantastic team to support people in building agile tools, but some areas are doing it really well. Some areas haven't even started. So there's not a big coordinated effort to move towards agile. It's a bit different wherever you go.
Wasn't it so that you also have a dedicated discovery design thinking team that can come in and help you doing the discovery phase, understanding the users, and doing that in a really quick manner, kind of in days, week?
No, we're lucky enough that we've got a fantastic team that support us with design thinking. So we can do a design sprint, which is 4 days locked in a room, listening to end users at the start and the end, and building prototypes and working together in a really intense way in between. And it's great. So we're really lucky to have that, but you don't need that to get started.
Thank you so much. And for those of you who were listening, I hope that you got a lot of things to think about and maybe 1 or 2 practical ideas from today. Sarah, I'm looking forward to hearing where this is all taking you as well, personally, going from knowing 0 to being the Agile lead in T&L for your company. Looking forward to connecting with you again. Thank you everyone for spending the 50 minutes with us today. Hope you enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone.
Thanks
Bye.
everybody. Bye.